Leto. Thank you. So the talk I'm giving today is called Animations with Flutter, When to Use What. And just a few months ago, I was actually new to Flutter, and I was overwhelmed with animations. So this is basically going to be what I've learned in that time and what I've could share in 30 minutes, basically. So I am a software engineer. I work on material Flutter with Will and MH, who are also here. So yeah, I'll just get right into it. So the goals for this talk are, one, not to be overwhelmed by the number of different ways there are to animate something in Flutter, because there are quite a few. And two, after this talk, hopefully you'll be able to animate something, anything. And of course, you'll do it by choosing the right method to do so. So at the bottom here, I just have a bunch of terms that I'm not going to define right now, but maybe we'll see some of them as we go through the talk, and they'll make more sense at that time. So the only thing I'm going to define is what is an animation. I think it's basically just a sequence of images, but it's a fun sequence of images. By that I mean it has a purpose to kind of add an aesthetic value to the app that you're animating in, or also it can have some purpose to show intent or highlight something important. But at the end of the day, it's really just something that adds a little bit of flavor to your app. So the example I added here was, this is something that some apps do with their menu icon. It's actually in Material as well on Android. I've seen it in a few places. But basically, when you click the menu icon, in the same spot that the icon was, a new icon appears, which is a back button. But instead of just changing from hamburger icon to arrow, it kind of does it in a fun way where the bars of the hamburger turn into the arrow and vice versa. So it's little things like that that can just add to the overall feel of the app and also add some professionalism to it. So in Flutter, there are a few types of animations, and they're all done via widgets because everything is a widget. But before we go through this, how many of you have animated something in Flutter before? Oh, pretty good. And I can't really, this is a hard question to ask, but did you get a good grasp of it? Do you have a good grasp on it? So, okay. So yeah, maybe going through this classification here and when to use what, we'll walk away with a little bit of a better understanding. So the first, first of all, this chart here is basically showing 3 types of widgets that you can animate with, and they vary in degree of customization. And the trend basically is the more customization you need, the more complex constructing the animation will be. And that kind of might be obvious, but we're just going to go in order here and progress our way up. So we're going to start with implicit widgets. Here is a list of all the implicit widgets that Flutter provides. These are all classes, and they all extend something called an implicitly animated widget. Okay, so throughout this talk, I'm going to try to do some live coding. If it doesn't work out, I'll just copy and paste it so you can at least see what's going on. So I'm going to open up Android Studio. Okay, so let me run this application here. It's already running in the background, actually, so just refresh. So this is the starter app that comes when you start a new Flutter project in Android Studio. So how many of you have seen this app before? Okay, almost everybody, good. All right, so you kind of know what it does. I'm not going to spend too much time explaining it, but there's basically a button, and I can click, and there's a counter. So something to take note of here is this set state call that increments the counter. I'm going to use this to trigger the animations because I'm going to rely on the counter changing, which will cause the widget to rebuild. I'm going to rely on that to trigger some of the animations throughout. So think of that as when set state gets called and counter gets incremented, the widget's going to rebuild with a new value of counter, and I'll use that to tick the next animation. All right, so the very first animation I'm going to do is an implicit animation. I'm going to wrap the text widget here in an animated text style, so I can change the color of the text. So I used Option Enter, which brings up a little nifty shortcut here where you can do something called wrap with new widget. And I'm going to do animated default text style. And immediately Flutter will say, or the IDE will tell me, I need a duration and a style. So I'll add a duration. And duration is just another object here. I can give the duration in anything, like days, seconds. Common thing to use for animations are milliseconds, so I'm going to use milliseconds throughout when I deal with durations. And I'll do 2 seconds, which is 2,000 milliseconds. Okay, so I have my duration, and now I need a style. So I'm just actually going to move this style that was statically set here on the text, and I'll just move it up to the animated default text style. And my child is now what was previously the text. So if I run this, I have the same app. That's because I've wrapped something in the animated object, but I didn't actually trigger any animations. So I have to change the style every time it rebuilds. So most objects in Flutter that you have to deal with for animating like this will come with something called copy with, where it's going to use what was already there, and I'll be able to add in a color. So what I want to do is I'll change the color depending on whether the number is even or odd. So I'll take the counter value, determine if it's either even or odd by modding by 2, and if it's even, I will make it blue, and if it's odd, I'll make it pink. Okay, so now let's see what this looks like. I reset the app, it's blue, and I clicked it, and I don't know if you noticed it, but it changed to pink. Did everybody see that? Okay, so I can just keep on incrementing. Now it's blue, and it's back to pink. So it'll just keep doing that, and it takes 2 seconds because I've said 2,000 milliseconds there. There's actually something interesting going on there. I didn't tell it how to go from blue to pink or pink to blue, but it kind of magically knew. So what's basically going on there is that because I'm using an implicit widget, it knows how to what's called tween its values. A tween is a very simple object that basically has a start and an end, and it knows how to determine all the values in between it. So luckily, the text style comes with, like I was saying, all of these tweens by default. So I'm going to open up the text style, and I'll show you all the values that you can tween. And there they are. So you can see color right at the top there. That's the one I use. But you can actually animate one or many of these at the same time. And the implicit animation will know how to do this already. So it's pretty cool. OK, so that was the first animation. Now, let's say I wanted to do something a little bit more to this number. I could do a transformation on it. A transformation is usually a translation, a rotation, or a scale, meaning sliding it around, rotating it, or making it bigger and smaller. So I'm just going to choose a rotation. And I am going to copy and paste this code because we don't have that much time. And I'll show you what I changed. So basically, if I were live coding this, I would have grabbed the animated text style here. I would have hit Alt-Enter, and I would have said wrap with a new widget. and I would have chosen animated container. So the animated container is another implicit widget that lets me do transformations. So you can see the transform that is added in there is basically telling the animation to rotate by 1/12 of the circle. So the angle is in radians, which is 2 pi. So by dividing by 6, that's 2 pi divided by 12. So it's 12 clicks is going to do a full rotation around with the number. So let's see what that looks like. And I'm using a shortcut on the keyboard, which is Command-Shift-Backspace, which resets, it does a hot load, but it also resets the state, so that's why it's going back down to 0. You get the same thing by clicking this button, but now you know. Okay, so, maybe that's what you expected, maybe not, but you can see it's kind of rotating about a point, not necessarily rotating like I kind of wanted, but I'll just continue through here. Oh, so that was weird. Does anybody know why that might have happened? So basically what happened was I got to the end of the rotation, and the tween value doesn't necessarily know how to go from past 360, so it went backwards to 0. So it went the opposite direction. So now I've kind of hit a point where maybe my implicit widget is not going to do what I need it to do. There may be a way to tweak this, but it's going to be more complicated than I want it to be. So this is a good time to maybe introduce the next type of animation. So back to the slides real quick. So we saw implicit widgets. Those were both implicit animations via implicit widgets. But the next one we're going to do is a transition widget. And these are the types of transition widgets that Flutter has built in. They're actually all subclassing something called an animated widget, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But these are all the transitions that subclass the animated widget. And you might notice that there's some overlap with what was available in the implicit widget. And that's basically because this is like the next level of animations, but we still need to be able to animate in all different ways. So I'll go back to the code. And I will use a transition widget here. Again, just for the sake of time, I'm going to copy and paste it in here. So I'll highlight the new transition here. So the same way I wrapped the widget before, I just replaced it with a different kind of widget, transition widget. So when doing this type of animation, I need to make sure that my outer widget now has some more, remember I said that the more customization you want, the more complicated implementing the animation will be. So I've had to add in extend another class here, a mixin, that allows the animation to tick. And I've had to add a new member variable called the controller. So this is important. The animation controller is basically what kind of separates the implicit widgets from the transition widgets. There are a few other things, but this is one of the main purposes that you would go from using an implicit widget to a transition widget. So I'll go over what the animation controller allows you to do, but let's first go through what I've added here, or finish going through what I've added. So another thing that you have to do in this type of animation is you have to tell it what is doing the vsync. So it's usually just the widget that you have now extended or mixed in with this single ticker provider. And I'm going to comment out because that's actually the solution, but I want to show you what happens first if I didn't have that there. If I just had the default version of this, I would create my controller, and then on tick, I've told it to animate to 1/12. So this isn't animating, and also it stopped. So this still isn't quite what I want. What's going on here basically is that by default, the bounds of the tween, the start and the end, are 0 and 1. So in this world, 1 is 1 full turn. but it can't go past 1 full turn. And my milliseconds are also too small, so you didn't actually see anything. But if I take that away, or sorry, not take that away, if I change the upper bound to infinity, I'm basically allowing it to turn indefinitely. And now my duration is just 1 slice of that turn. So there I've gotten past the first turn, and of course I can keep going forever to infinity. This is sort of a workaround. I just wanted to show because I thought it was cool just by adding the animation controller, I could change one property on the animation controller and get the desired behavior. And another way to do it would be to reset the tween. So every time you need to tick, you would tick from the previous value to the new value yourself. But I'm going to skip that for now because I want to show you some other things. Okay, so I mentioned AnimatedWidget. The AnimatedWidget, again, is the class that all of those transitions, I showed you the rotation transition, but all these transitions extend that class. And it's basically a helper class to help you write animations that tick. So if you wanted to write a custom animated widget, you would use this class. So the next thing I wanted to show really quick are different curves. All of the curves I've showed so far are linear, and with that, they're constant linear curves, meaning they're just going from 0 to 1 in the simplest way, like a perfectly straight diagonal line. That's not on here, actually. These are all different curves that I pulled courtesy of this website. But by changing the curve, you basically change the motion of the animation. It changes the timing that the different frames appear. So you can get all sorts of effects by changing the curves. And I can show some different curves real quick. So using the example I just had, if I wanted to add curves, I would add another member here, which is an animation, and I can create an animation by creating a curve and saying the parent is the animation controller. So the curve I'll show now is called an ease curve. Oh, and one other thing I changed to show the curve better is every time I click now, it's going to do a full rotation, just so you can see kind of the motion better. So you notice how that one kind of slows down at the end and starts out kind of fast. So that's like something that very rarely do you use like a default curve. Like most designers will pick some kind of curve that model real world behavior a little bit better. So all these curves are based off things like friction in the real world and just a smoother way to get from point A to point B. So I'll show you one other curve. Hot reload. So that one, I'll do it again, just so you can see it, but it's actually overshooting and then going back and kind of wavering until it kind of settles in. So that one's called elastic out. There's also something called elastic in, which is the similar, kind of in reverse. So those are curves. You can make custom curves, you can stitch curves together, you can do all kinds of things with curves, but I can't cover that right now. I just wanted to show you that you can apply curves to animations. Okay, so before I get to explicit animations, there's one more thing I wanted to show you. Since the issue of rotating all the way technically could have been done in implicit animations, I want to show you something that really can't be done at all. And this is using the controller to do things like pause, reverse, and reset the animation. So I'll highlight the code that I've changed here in this example. I basically said when it's even, go forward, rotate forward, and when it's odd, I want you to go backwards. So let's see what that looks like. So it's rotating already. Now when I click this button, all it's going to do is reverse the animation. There it goes. So it does one rotation and then it stops, but I can reverse it in the middle of it going. So that's something you really can't do easily with an implicit widget. So again, the animation controller gives you access to things like that, the lower bound, the upper bound, whether or not to play it, when to play it, and things like that. Okay, so we've done implicit widgets, we've done transition widgets. Now, explicit widgets are kind of like the extreme customization thing that you only should really be touching if you're going to be doing some really crazy type of animation. So rather than code one up, I'm just going to pull one from a material design case study. It's from the app Shrine, and when I was making this, it wasn't actually out yet, but I think it just got published. So you can actually go look at it now in the Flutter repo, or in the Flutter/samples repo. And in the guidelines. This is the Shrine app, and this is a class called the Expanding Bottom Sheet. As you can see, as I'm scrolling through this file, it's just a ton of stuff with having to do with animations. So it's quite the customization. As you can see here, there's custom curves. There's all kinds of kind of physics-based animations here. There's a bunch of animations being combined. So let's just quickly take a look on what it looks like. So this is a shopping app. So if I add something to the cart, sunglasses, notice this little piece here, what happens. Kind of expanded in a smooth way, and it added the sunglasses to the cart. So this is like, instead of just a cart that says 1, 2, 3, this is literally showing me what I have in the cart. And when I click on it, it expands. And the animation is actually really awesome. If you watch it, it kind of comes out and goes up smoothly in a nice sequence. And all this is achieved with an explicit animation. What makes an animation explicit is the fact that it's using something called the animated builder. The animated builder allows you to separate the transition from the building, basically. So you can stitch together all of these animations in a method and then call that from within your build. So it's much easier to manage complex animations this way. So it's not to say that you can't actually achieve this animation via the other methods I was showing you. It would just look really bad because you'd have to be wrapping all the stuff together and it would get very hairy. So at this point, when you have an animation this large, you should be using a animated builder. And just to show you this build cart method here, this is basically where everything is happening. And you can see that this person that wrote this put all of the animation creations in their own method, so it was very organized and easy to follow how this animation is being built. That was actually done by an intern that we had over the summer, so yeah, she did really good. Okay, so just to go over kind of what we went through, this chart here shows the 3 types of animations we talked about and kind of their properties that they have and their dependencies once you build them. So again, one of the main differentiators between implicit and transition was the AnimationController. And then the main differentiator between transition and explicit was the animation builder. All these other things like vsync and ticker, those are just things you have to do once you decide that your animation is going to be a transition. So this was just the surface of animations. There's a whole lot of stuff that I can't possibly cover, and I also don't know. So here are some of them. I suggest you look at them and visit flutter.io. The quote of the day, I guess, is when in doubt, or don't be crazy. Yeah. So there's plenty of documentation and content at flutter.io/animations. And with that, are there any questions?